locked in fear, inside. It's like there was a latch on hope. Their hope was dead, and they were trapped inside in fear. But who could blame them? The powers that killed Jesus, not only the chief priests and the scribes, but Pontius Pilate and the Roman military empire wanting to keep the peace during the Passover, they killed him. And if they killed him, they could come after him. We know that fear in these times. How many rooms have we locked ourselves into out of fear, protection? Fearing what waits on the other side of those walls. How often have we pulled the blinds closed, and we're speaking metaphorically, maybe not like my neighbors, but I don't want to know about this, it's too much. The world is too wounded for me. This is a kind of tomb that we also encase ourselves into. There's so much news happening this week. April 23rd, we honored Earth Day. It's the 55th anniversary of it. And it's an annual moment to pay attention to our Earth, as if we shouldn't be paying attention every day. The day was born from the courage of Rachel Carson, an American marine biologist, I see some heads nodding, author and conservationist, who's considered an environmental activist pioneer. Her 1962 book, Silent Spring, I don't know if any of you have read it, yeah, was credited with launching the modern environmental justice movement. She showed us at that time that DDT was poisoning our waters and causing birds' eggs in the nest to crack before the little chicks had developed. And how long it took for us to listen. How many locked doors of denial and defense. Chemical corporation leaders questioned her sanity and said, and I quote, "Following her teaching would return us to the dark ages." But Carson persisted, writing, "Humans are a part of nature, and our war against nature is a war against ourselves." Have you noticed how every prophet must first be ignored and then vilified before they're finally, reluctantly heard? Think of Dr. King. Think of Jesus. Think of Oscar Romero. Think of Pope Francis in some ways, especially a passion for the justice of the poor and the planet. Notice in today's gospel what happens. Jesus comes and stands among his disciples. He's not troubled by locks, by doubts, barricades, by fears, barbed wires. "Peace be with you," he says, to those who abandoned him. Peace be with you. And immediately he shows them his hands and his side. He's not a conquering hero. He's not what they expected. He's not unmarked by battle. He is a wounded healer, carrying the evidence of his suffering like an identity card. Here I am, the one who was pierced for love. Have you ever noticed how every living thing carries its wounds? The tree with its lightning scar, the sparrow with its broken wing. I can imagine each one of us has scars on our bodies that we could show if we really wanted to. I've got one here, I've got two here. We have wounds, it's part of, and we heal. It's part of our story. And the earth itself, with its melting glaciers, its rising seas, its species disappearing like the myths this morning. And Pope Francis saw this clearly. The wounds of our planet, the wounds of the world's poorest people, and understood they were one single wound, one cry. And he said, we must hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. In his encyclical, Laudate Deum, which means praise God, Pope Francis specifically called out this country, the United States, pointing to the disproportionate impact that we have on the climate crisis, noting that at the time our per-person emissions were twice those of China and 7 times those of the world's poorest countries. And yet, which countries are most impacted by them? The poorest. He challenged what he called our irresponsible lifestyle connected with the Western model, our consumption and waste, and a system that values profits over people, convenience over creation. His voice, as humble as he was, spoke truth to power, sometimes faltering, sometimes bold, sometimes asking like Jesus would ask, who am I to judge? For it is the question that matters sometimes more than the answer. The willingness to stand in a space of not knowing, of holy uncertainty. That first Earth Day in 1970 came after Americans had seen our planet from space. Do you remember that first image? It's moon rising, it's on the horizon of the moon, and you see this beautiful blue planet. It was a paradigm shift, seeing in a new way. Our relationship was something so much bigger. Like we're animals on a rock in space, look at that. This blue miracle rising over the moon's horizon. And we saw it in 1970 after oil had spilled off the Santa Barbara coast, the beaches, killing seabirds, sea lions, dolphins, and after chemical contaminants set the Ohio Cuyahoga River on fire. It took catastrophe to open our eyes, just as it took crucifixion to open the eyes of the disciples. And yet, even now, catastrophe continues, most often in communities of color, in low-income neighborhoods where toxic facilities are disproportionately placed, where children breathe the polluted air and drink contaminated water. This is what our denomination, the UCC, has named environmental racism. The way environmental burdens fall heaviest on those with the least power to resist them. And here in Oakland, we've seen it. West Oakland's disproportionately higher asthma rates. In Richmond's shadow of refinery emissions. In Bayview, Hunters Point, legacy of contamination. We see it in indigenous communities fighting for their water, and Black communities facing the first and worst impacts of climate change. But we also see resistance rising. In February of this year, Bay Area Air Quality Management District announced stronger rulings for refineries. East Bay Community Energy is expanding clean power options. San Francisco recently committed to 100% renewable energy by 2040. Local community gardens and urban farms are transformed food deserts, becoming oases of fresh produce. At last month's visioning retreat that we held here, we affirmed environmental stewardship as a high priority for us, partially because of, we love creation. This sanctuary itself, this place, is sacred because we're witnessing the beauty of creation. And we recognize our responsibility and our faith to care for creation, especially the prevalence of environmental racism. It is an invitation to a deeper faith. It is an invitation to the rest and the restorative experience of being in nature. A week after that first Easter evening, Jesus appears and says to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hand. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. Stop doubting. Believe." What an invitation to touch wounds directly, to place our fingers where pain has been, and to use our hands for healing, just like Jesus' touch. Isn't this what we're asked to do? To touch the wounds in the world, to heal? So 55 years ago, Earth Day, Gaylord Nelson, the Wisconsin senator who organized Earth Day, hoped to turn the energy of the time, the war protests against Vietnam, and then channel that toward the environment, protecting the environment in light of the crises. And 20 million people in this country joined him. That was 10% of the population at the time. All kinds of people, all political parties, rich and poor, city and country folk, labor leaders and bosses. In the same way, Thomas reached out and touched his hand into the wound, and in that touch found faith. Nelson and those 20 million people touched the wounds of the earth and found both grief and hope. And yet, here we are 55 years later with the same question. Who owns this earth? Who's responsible for it? Are these just assets on a balance sheet to be inventoried off? Or is this land sacred, a sacred trust? Sanctuaries of life and beauty that have no price. The World Economic Forum Global Risk Report finds that environmental risks make up half of the top 10 risks in the next 10 years. The disciples' risk assessment included crucifixion, persecution, imprisonment, yet they went out and they bore witness. They touched the wounds with healing hands. The world is full of locked doors, people afraid to believe that anything good can come from such loss, that any green blade of grass can rise up from the ever-increasing scorched earth. But Jesus passes through these doors, passes through these doubts, passes through our well-reasoned despair. "Peace be with you," he says, showing his wounds. And then he breathes the Spirit into them, life again. Just reminding us of the Genesis stories of primordial winds and the waters of creation, newness, a new day. Not only on the earth, but within us. That first Earth Day led to world-changing legislation, the EPA, the passage of landmark legislation, Clean Water, Clean Air, and the Endangered Species Act. And in the same way, that first Easter led to something I think the disciples could barely imagine, a movement that would cross borders and languages and countries and cultures, and that would call people not just in words, but in actions with their lives. So I believe in this kind of resurrection, not just one man, one morning, but of communities rising from fear and despair to hope. Movements growing from small seeds to forests of change. I believe in the kind of resurrection that Pope Francis embodied at his best, standing with the wounded and the vulnerable, seeing interconnection where others only saw separation, speaking of hope when others only saw devastation. I think of the disparaging words when Rachel Carson wrote her brilliant book. If we were to faithfully follow the teachings of Miss Carson, an executive from the American Cyanide Company said, we would return to the dark ages, the insects, disease, and vermin would once again inherit the earth. His words echoed those who mocked Jesus. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross, as if power means avoiding suffering, as if strength means denying vulnerability, as if leadership means domination over rather than service. This past week, I've been watching this little swallow building a nest in a tree, my neighbor's, it's a maple tree, and twig by twig, branch by branch, thinking about that swallow, not knowing, will these birds even hatch? Will storms come and blow it over? Just building anyway and singing anyway. She lives as if spring is more than just an idle rumor. I think this is resurrection. Not the absence of wounds, but the presence of life in spite of it. Not the denial of death, but the insistence that it does not have to have the final word. It's the swallow building her nest. It's the disciples leaving their locked room. It's Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring with 55 footnotes, a book that she thought no one will ever read. It's Earth Day, calling out to hear the cries of the earth, to touch the wounds, to hear the cries of the poor, to touch their wounds. And it's you stepping out the door this morning, each and every morning, choosing to believe that love is stronger than fear. There's a melody that we'll sing that many of you are familiar with, and one of the phrases is, through all this tumult and strife, no storm can shake our inmost calm. When to that rock, that refuge I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? Through all of the tumult and strife that we're going through, all the environmental challenges and social divisions, the song persists, just like a songbird. Be not afraid, says the wind. Be not afraid, says the green grass rising. Be not afraid, says the risen Christ. And just like that swallow, we find our voice again. That song of resurrection that refuses to be silenced. A melody of hope that rises above and through every locked door. May it be so with us. Amen. And please join in our sermon response, How Can I Keep From Singing? And it's in our Skyline songbook, number 10.